उच्चतम न्यायालय के न्यायाधीश भी उपस्थित हैं। भारतीय संविधान देश के सभी नागरिकों को अधिकार प्रदान करता है, साथ ही कर्तव्यों का बोध भी कराता है कि एक जिम्मेदार नागरिक होने के नाते हम सबके क्या क्या कर्तव्य हैं। देश की प्रगति और उन्नति में हम सब अपने अपने स्तर से क्या योगदान दे सकते हैं। संविधान की जो प्रस्तावना है वो भी बहुत अनूठी है और वो पूरे संविधान का सार भी उसमें निहित है। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री मुख्य मंच पर अपना स्थान ग्रहण करते हुए
Chief Justice of India and the judges of the Supreme Court, a very warm welcome to the inaugural function of the Constitution Day celebrations. The Constitution of India was adopted by the Constituent Assembly on the 26th of November 1949, and the Constitution came into effect on the 26th of January 1950. On this very special occasion, we are honored by the august presence of the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji. We would also like to welcome the Honorable Chief Justice of India, Shri Justice N.V. Ramana, the Honorable Minister of Law and Justice, Shri Kiran Rijiju, the Honorable Shri Justice U.U. Lalit, Judge, Supreme Court of India, the Honorable Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, Judge, Supreme Court of India, the Honorable Attorney General of India, Shri K.K. Venugopal, and Shri Vikas Singh, President of the Supreme Court Bar Association. May I request the Honorable Shri Justice U.U. Lalit, Judge, Supreme Court of India, to deliver the welcome address.
Honorable Shri Narendra Modi ji, Prime Minister of India, Honorable Justice N.V. Ramana, Chief Justice of India, Honorable Mr. Kiran Rijiju, Law Minister, Government of India, my esteemed colleague, Dr. Justice Chandrachud, Judge, Supreme Court of India, all my brother and sister judges who are present today, Mr. K.K. Venugopal, Attorney General for India, Mr. Vikas Singh, President, Supreme Court Bar Association, all the Chief Justices of various High Courts who are present today, all the senior-most judges of the High Court who are present today, all senior members at the bar, senior advocates, junior members, everyone who is present there, all the members of the registry who are present, the officials of the registry, persons from the media, ladies and gentlemen. Exactly 72 years ago, a sacred document was adopted by 284 founding fathers of this nation. It was preceded by 3 years of hard work, extensive deliberations, series of meetings where great minds, great souls had worked on only one mission, and that is to give a vision document for this country, a document which would spell and which would chalk out the destiny of this nation. 26 January, 2 months later, the Constitution came into force. 28th of January, the first sitting of the Supreme Court took place in the portion where, in the Parliament, and that's how the first sitting was attended by 9 Chief Justices of various high courts. The journal section in 1950 SCR reproduces the speech given by the then Chief Justice M.H. Kania. And it's a testament for whatever happened that day, a brilliant speech. And today, now, for the first time, so many Chief Justices of various high courts are present today on this occasion. It's a great occasion to have you here. I welcome all of you here. Our Constitution was the work of those founding fathers who toiled really hard. The Constituent Assembly debates bear testimony for their efforts. They were persons of great vision, great character, and they gave this Constitution to us. Over the last 72 years, there have been 105 amendments. Initially, we started with only 8 schedules, 395 articles. Today, we have 466 articles. 9 schedule got added by the First Amendment. 10 schedule also got added, so 2 more schedules. 3 more parts also got added. One was Fundamental Duties chapter. The other was, so far as administrative tribunals are concerned, one more part got added. And then local panchayat and local government, self-government's issues, they were dealt with by the Part 9 and Part 9A. What is significant is 4 regions got added to this union. The first one was Dadra and Nagar Haveli by the 10th Amendment, which was in 1961. Second one was Goa, Daman and Diu by 12th Amendment. Then followed Pondicherry, that is Yanam, Mahe and Karaikal, that was by 14th Amendment. And then finally Sikkim by 36th Amendment. What is of great historical importance is that except the first one, second, third and fourth, they were preceded by either police action or mutual understanding and agreements. Dadra and Nagar Haveli perhaps is the only example where the people living in that region, they decided that they would like to be part of the Indian Union. Leave aside that, we have seen this Constitution undergo so many changes. One of the basic and right since first Kameshwar Prasad Singh case, First Amendment, the tussle between right to property and the directive principles of policy. So we saw 44th Amendment deleting 19(1)(f) from the chapter of Part 3, deleting 31 from Chapter 3. So one fundamental right got out of that chapter, but a significant fundamental right which got included, right to education. Original Article 45 simply stated that state shall endeavor and see that all children between 5 to 14 are provided free and compulsory education. The time limit was prescribed was 10 years. But now the mandate is that every child must be given free and compulsory education. So therefore, now see the emphases which are changing. Now we are towards the basic idea that yes, every child must be given free, compulsory, and going by the dicta of the Supreme Court, good quality education. These are the changes that the Constitution has undergone over a period of time, 105 amendments. We have seen turbulent times, we have seen trying times, and this Constitution has given us strength, character, and that feeling of building of the nation. This Constitution is a document of great vision of our founding fathers. But at the time when it was adopted, two persons, that's Dr. Ambedkar and Dr. Rajendra Prasad, unequivocally stated that what we have given you is a fantastic document, but it depends upon the persons who will be working this Constitution. And that's what last 72 years have actually taught us. We have been, as nation, as citizens, been very resilient. We have withstood every pressure. Our constitutional functionaries or authorities have worked absolutely in a fantastic manner, barring few aberrations. In fact, the Constitution reposes that faith in all functionaries and machineries that everybody will work towards the goal, that is development of this nation, and in the most reasonable way, and the way that the Constitution has mandated. It is this functioning that we celebrate on this Constitution Day. In 1979, the Supreme Court Bar Association for the first time mooted this idea that 26th of November, when the Constitution was adopted by the Constituent Assembly, be celebrated as Law Day. 79 was close on the heels of the turbulent times of just few years back. And that's the charter, the pledge, or the oath, which is a fantastic document which must be reproduced and followed at every juncture. But Law Day would have been confined to the Supreme Court Bar Association. Now today we are celebrating it as Constitution Day. This Constitution is for us to preserve. This Constitution is stated to be a fantastic document by all experts, but it is for us to work in that direction of development. It is for us to use this as a tool, as a vehicle for advancement of all our socio-economic goals. And that's why we celebrate Constitution Day. Welcome you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now request the President, Supreme Court Bar Association, Shri Vikas Singh, to address the audience.
Honorable the Prime Minister of India, Honorable the Chief Justice of India, Honorable Union Minister for Law and Justice, Honorable Justice U.U. Lalit, Honorable Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, the Learned Attorney General for India, the Chief Justices of various High Courts, Judges of various High Courts, other dignitaries, my colleagues and friends. We have gathered today to celebrate Law Day, which celebration was started by the Supreme Court Bar Association in 1979. In 2015, the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, announced to celebrate this day as the Constitution Day on the 125th birth anniversary of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Judiciary plays a very important role as an interface between the Constitution of India and the citizens of this country. Accordingly, appointment of most meritorious people to the higher judiciary is the constitutional mandate. When the National Judicial Appointments Commission was conceived, it had two important features. One, relating to ensuring that the most meritorious are appointed to the higher judiciary by framing regulations, prescribing criteria for such appointment, and second, relating to persons who will have the final say in the actual appointment. The NJSC was struck down by the Supreme Court on the latter ground only, regarding who has the right to appoint. In fact, the Constitution bench judgment records in the penultimate paragraph about having a memorandum of procedure to ensure that the best names are considered by collegiums transparently and to provide for a permanent secretariat to assist the collegiums in finalizing names. I am of the very firm opinion that a suitable legislation in the form of a bill to regulate the collegium system can be brought within the said limitation, which will facilitate the appointment of judges to the High Court as well as Supreme Court. The bill should provide a permanent secretariat both at the High Court and the Supreme Court level to assist them in the matter of appointment of judges as members of the collegium, being senior judges in the various courts, do not have enough spare time for this honorable responsibility. The collegium will determine the eligibility for appointment to the higher judiciary, and the secretariat would constantly update the list of persons who qualify as per the said eligibility. The said legislation will ensure that even members of the Supreme Court Bar Association who are so far neglected from consideration and are regularly considered for elevation. The legislation to bring in more transparency can also provide for taking comments of two eminent senior advocates of the particular court before considering any name for appointment. I have already drafted a bill in my individual capacity and given the same to the Honorable Law Minister in my first meeting with him. If the Constitution of India has to remain as an instrument to bring about social change and to ensure that the people of this country get the fruits of what the Constitution enshrines, the laws made need to be constantly updated. Though the present government has taken good steps in this regard, there is still a long way to go in updating our laws in line with the changes in our society. One of the cardinal features of our Constitution was to make the right to approach Supreme Court under Article 32 a fundamental right. However, there is no right of appeal under this very important jurisdiction. Article 145 provides for Supreme Court making rules subject to any law made by Parliament. I feel that a parliamentary law to provide for a right for an intra-court appeal in Supreme Court in matters of determination of rights under 32 will provide an opportunity for correcting any errors that may have crept in the original judgments of the Supreme Court under Article 32. Public interest litigations are being entertained under 32, and many a time some PILs cover issues which have far-reaching consequences, and decisions of the Supreme Court are taken without any adequate consultation with all the stakeholders involved. Many a times, judgments under Article 32 transgress into the domain of the executive. Providing for an intra-court appeal will ensure the constitutional guarantee of proper justice and will also help in maintaining the discipline of separation of powers. When the Constitution was adopted, on 26th of November 1949, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the President of the Constituent Assembly, had the following observations. If the people who are elected are capable and men of character and integrity, then they will be able to make the best of even a defective constitution. If they are lacking in these, the constitution cannot help the country. After all, a constitution, like a machine, is a lifeless thing. It acquires life because of the men who control it and operate it, and India needs today nothing more than a set of honest men who will have the interest of the country before them. It requires men of strong character, men of vision, men who will not sacrifice the interest of the country at large for the sake of smaller groups and areas. We can only hope that the country will throw up such men in abundance. Dr. Prasad also expressed two regrets. There are only two regrets, and in his words I quote, "There are only two regrets which I must share with the honorable members. I would have liked to have some qualification laid down for members of the legislatures. It is anomalous that we should insist upon high qualification for those who administer or help in administering the law, but none for those who made it except that they are elected. A lawgiver requires intellectual equipment, but even more than that, the capacity to take a balanced view of things, to act independently, and above all, to be true to those fundamental things of life, in one word, to have character. It is not possible to devise any yardsticks for measuring the moral qualities of a man, and so long as that is not possible, our constitution will remain defective. The other regret is that we have not been able to draw up our first constitution of a free Bharat in an Indian language. The difficulties in both cases were practical and proved insurmountable. Our experience in the recent past has been that persons with criminal background are getting elected to the parliament, and the percentage of such people, which was 24% in 2004, has progressively increased to 43% in 2019. A situation has come now that persons who are alleged to have broken the law are in fact making the law. I personally feel that firstly, persons charged sheet of heinous crimes should be debarred from contesting elections, and persons convicted should also be debarred for life from contesting an election by making appropriate amendment to the Representation of Peoples Act 1951. If a person holding a public office cannot be reinstated after conviction, there is no justification for a legislator to be able to as such. I believe that this country is destined to walk amongst the most developed nations of the world, and our response to the COVID pandemic, for which I congratulate the Honorable Prime Minister, has shown that India has the capability to help the entire world in times of crisis, and I am positive that in this new world, India's time to gain superpower status can no longer be denied by the world. I also take this opportunity to announce on this Constitution Day the service of our members of the Bar, including the members of my Executive Committee of the Supreme Court Bar Association, to do pro bono service for the needy on regular basis by having a system for the same in place. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now call upon the Honorable Attorney General of India, Shri K.K. Venugopal, to say a few words.
Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, Honorable Chief Justice of India, Justice N.V. Ramana, Honorable Minister for Law and Justice, Shri Kiran Rijiju, Honorable Justice U.U. Lalit, Judge Supreme Court of India, Honorable Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, Judge Supreme Court of India, Honorable Judges of the Supreme Court of India, present and former, Honorable Justices, Chief Justices and Justices of the High Courts, Shri Tushar Mehta, Learned Solicitor General, Shri Vikas Singh, President SCBA, my colleagues at the bar, and ladies and gentlemen. Over the period of the last 75 years, the big question which has been thrown up is the Supreme Court a true constitutional court? We find today that the Supreme Court has expanded its coverage of cases to include every single case decided by the high courts, as long as they find that there is an error in the judgment, the law has not been stated correctly, and what is worse, that there are serious errors of fact. Now, this would mean that so far as the Supreme Court is concerned, it can't truly claim to be a constitutional court. You have to remember that so far as the Western apex courts are concerned, they have managed their work in a manner where they are able to dispose of the cases within a period of 2 years. But what is the real situation so far as India is concerned? We find that in the Supreme Court list, there are criminal cases pending from 2008, civil cases pending from 2009. And if it is pending here from the Supreme Court for 12 years, then one should take into account that the cases have come from the trial courts and the high courts, where they have been pending for 10 years in the trial courts and about 8 to 10 years in the Supreme Court as well. This would mean that when finally justice is done to whichever is a party, a total period of 30 years has elapsed. And I would believe that you need a very, very bold person to file a case today in the trial court, because he would not know as to when the case would be finally reach a conclusion, and if he's a person of 50 or 60 years old, whether he would be there to see the fruits of whatever litigation he has started. And therefore, I think the time has come for rethinking the position so far as the Supreme Court of India is concerned. From 2010, there has been a proposal that the Supreme Court cannot take on the burden of all the cases which it is doing today. Of course, with very good intentions. There are matrimonial cases, there are rent control cases, land acquisition cases, and it goes on and on and on. And these cases have nothing to do with the Constitution or the interpretation of the Constitution. Now, in this background, according to me, it is time that we sat back and thought of whether there is a solution. And the solution which has been suggested about in 2010 onwards is that there should be what is known as courts of appeal. Now, most of the Western countries, and I'm saying not because they are Western, but they are common law countries, and we are a common law country as well. Most of them, so far as they are concerned, they have an intermediate court of appeal between the high courts and the apex court of the country. And that is a court of appeal which absorbs all these cases of a nature which is other than constitutional cases, which the Supreme Court has been doing today, but which should be taken over by the courts of appeal. The judgments of the courts of appeal would be final. There would be no appeal from that. And I would envisage at least about 4 regions, the north, the south, the west, and the east, each having a court of appeal with 15 judges, consisting of 3 benches of 3 judges each. That means we are adding 60 judges who would be taking over these cases so that the pendency would be cut down, I think, to a very great extent. It would be reduced so that you would be able to get the cases disposed of within a period of 3 or 4 years. And this would mean that so far as the Supreme Court is concerned, it does not require the 34 judges which it's having now. Once it is relieved of all these burden of rent control, matrimonial, and so on, the result of it is that 15 judges sitting in 3 constitution benches of 5 each would be sufficient to dispose of cases of a constitutional nature, something where death sentence is involved, or the constitutional requirement of references and so on. Now, if they are therefore able to do this, the judges will have a long leisure. They'll be able to sit back. They'll be able to hear patiently. They'll be able to write excellent I mean, they're writing very good judgments now, but they could improve on that. They would be able to read the textbooks on law, which are written in various other countries, including India, and find that they introduce these into their judgments so that the thoughts and ideas. Now, today, we have 34 judges, but there was a very, very prescient article written by Justice K.K. Matthew, one of our eminent judges of the Supreme Court, in an article published in 1982, 3 Supreme Court cases. He had said that with visionary foresight, that he could envisage in due course a Supreme Court consisting of as many as 100 judges. If this is to be true, then I would say that so far as we are concerned, we are admitting to a failure to regulate and structure our court system in a manner where it would be able to bring justice swiftly and at reasonable prices to the litigants of this country. It should be remembered that so far as the right to access to justice is concerned, it is a fundamental right. And being a fundamental right, it means that they should have access to justice at reasonable cost and within a reasonable period of time. 30 years is not a reasonable period of time. And therefore, I believe that the time has come when there has to be a rethinking about the entire structure of the Supreme Court as it exists today. Because there is no use brushing the whole thing under a carpet. Are we aware of the fact as to what is the suffering that a litigant undergoes when at the trial court he has to go on from day to day and wait? And each time the case is adjourned by 6 months. And he doesn't know as to when the case will be taken up and finished. Therefore, whatever reforms are going to be done should not be restricted to the Supreme Court alone. It should think of the high courts and it should think of the trial courts. Today, we have inherited a system which is extremely cumbersome, where the procedure in the Civil Procedure Code, which is a fat book, would result necessarily in delaying the disposal of cases. The criminal cases, of course, have to have a procedure which gives a full right of defense to the accused. But I think that the cumbersome procedures which exist should be done away with. We have the writ petitions, which can be filed, disposed of within a week or 10 days. It can never be done if you follow the procedure in a Civil Procedure Code. Therefore, so far as I am concerned, I think the time has come when I think both the government as well as the judiciary should put their heads together, because one cannot allow today's situation to continue, because we are not really doing justice. We are ignoring a fundamental right, perhaps violating the fundamental right by allowing this structure of courts to remain. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now request the Honorable Minister of Law and Justice, Shri Kiren Rijiju, to share his thoughts.
Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, Honorable Shri Justice N.V. Ramanna, Chief Justice of India, Honorable Justice U.U. Lalit, Judge Supreme Court, Honorable Shri Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, Judge Supreme Court of India, Shri K.K. Venugopal, Honorable Attorney General of India, Honorable Judges of the Supreme Court, Honorable Chief Justices and the Judges of the High Courts, Shri Vikas Singh, President Supreme Court Bar Association, senior officers of the Government of India, learned law officers, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen. I am deeply honored to be part of the celebration of the Constitution Day today to commemorate the adoption of the Constitution of India by the Constituent Assembly in 1949. The observation of the Constitution Day started in 2015 based on the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, to give due recognition to the significance of this historic day. As we all know, the Constitution of India is a living document and has stood the test of time. This sacred and sacrosanct document, delivered under the able guidance of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and often described as the world's finest constitution, reflects the dreams and aspirations and values of the people of India, and testifies the fact that the people are the ultimate source of all the authority. That is, the sovereignty lies with the people of India. The most important feature of the Indian Constitution is that it harmonizes interests of various sections of the society and exhorts every individual to attain excellence in chosen walk of life and collectively make India a great nation. The democratic process has ensured that our masses have a sense of participation in our development. By giving them a stake, we encourage each one to make a contribution to nation building. I take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the Constituent Assembly and the founding fathers who gave us the Constitution of India. I take this opportunity to inform this august House that to commemorate the Constitution Day, Ministry of Law and Justice has launched yesterday online course on the Indian Constitution. I firmly believe that we must facilitate and ensure that every Indian is access to the provisions of the Constitution of India. The aim of taking our Constitution to every citizen of India has to be made a reality, providing an opportunity to inculcate a deeper understanding of this history, knowledge, and the perspective of our Constitution. Although the Constitution is built on the principle of separation of power, it also warrants a harmonious relationship in the functioning of the three state organs. It is imperative that all the three organs of the state must work together to ensure social, economic, and political justice for the citizens of our country. The Constitution, among many other things, also highlights several important duties of each citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud that today, while addressing the members of Parliament in the Central Hall of the Parliament, Honorable Prime Minister has emphasized about giving primacy to fundamental duties. We all know fundamental rights are universal. It cannot be compromised with, but it is time we give due importance to fundamental duties. The outbreak of COVID-19 has hit very hard to our justice delivery mechanism. On this very auspicious occasion, let me make on record that we deeply appreciate the contributions made by all the honorable judges of our country. Our courts have risen to the occasion and made use of innovative information communication technology means to keep the doors of justice open to all. The Supreme Court has emerged as a global leader with more than 1.5 lakh virtual hearings. The high courts and the district courts together have conducted nearly 1.5 crore virtual hearings since the COVID period. This is something we feel proud of as an Indian. As part of the Digital India vision, Telelaw has emerged as an effective tool in creating an inclusive society as envisioned by our visionary Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji and his precepts of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Nyay. Integrating smart technology through tele and video conferencing, Telelaw has mainstreamed legal aid to the marginalized by connecting them with the dedicated pool of panel lawyers, either free of cost or at a nominal fees. A vast cadre of frontline paralegal volunteers and village-level entrepreneurs belonging to the local CSC neighborhood assist in awareness generation and online registration of beneficiaries needing the advice. I would like to applaud the efforts of NALSA for their special pan-India drive on citizen-centric programs to promote access to affordable justice for all, organized during the celebration of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. In the end, I am reminded of the famous quote from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, that the Constitution is not a mere lawyer's document. It is a vehicle of life, and its spirit is always the spirit of age. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. May I now request the Honorable Chief Justice of India, Shri Justice N.V. Ramana, to address the audience.
Honorable Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra Modi ji, Honorable Union Minister for Law and Justice, Sri Kiran Rijiju ji, my dear brothers Justice U. Lalit and Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, brother and sister judges of the Supreme Court, Sri K.K. Venugopal, Attorney General of India, Chief Justice and judges of different high courts, Sri S.P. Singh Baghela, Minister for State of Law and Justice, Mr. Vikas Singh, President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, Sri Manan Kumar Mishra, Chairman Bar Council of India, Sri Tushar Mehta, Solicitor General of India, law officers, senior advocates, office bearers and members of the Bar Council of India, Supreme Court Bar Association, Supreme Court Advocates on the Cards Association, media friends, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Namaskar. We the people of India gifted ourselves the Constitution 72 years ago to run our republic and as a liberal constitutional democracy. After intense and illuminating debates spread over nearly 3 years, the Constituent Assembly adopted the Constitution on this day in the year 1949. This is an occasion to recall the sacrifices made by countless patriots in the Indian freedom struggle. I feel privileged and honored to stand here and pay tribute to the freedom fighters who liberated us from colonial bondage. The struggle for freedom was aimed at emancipation, not merely political, but social and economic as well. I bow to the memory of the members of the Constituent Assembly who selflessly work day and night to present to the world one of the most modern, progressive, and scientific documents of the 20th century. I am proud that most of those who contributed to the framing of our Constitution belong to the legal fraternity. They were also in the forefront of the freedom struggle. Today, I am reminded the words of spoken by Baba Saheb Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on the 25th November 1949 in the Constituent Assembly while moving the motion for adoption of the draft Constitution. I quote, "However good a Constitution may be, it is sure to turn out bad because those who are called to work it happens to be a bad lot. However bad a Constitution may be, it may turn out to be good if those who are called to work it happen to be a good lot." Unquote. At a macro level, our experience so far assures us that the Constitution and the institutions have been in the safe hands. It is one of the strengths of the Constitution alone that we have reached great heights in various fields. That we have reached, the nation has made great strides in diverse fields such as space technology, information technology, pharma, and energy. We are self-sufficient in food grain production, infant mortality rate, life expectancy, and other indicators suggest that our enhanced standing globally. Today, India is among the major vaccine producers that support immunization program world over. We are among the leading exporters of vaccines, medicines, software, and many other products. It is a matter of pride that persons with roots in India are leading various international institutions of repute. I salute each one of those who made this nation progress. I would like to take this opportunity to share few of my thoughts with me. The framers of
the Constitution made accountability as an integral element with respect to the legislature and the executive. However, they consciously decided to keep the judiciary on a different pedestal. They trusted the competence of the men and women who would adorn the bench in upholding the Constitution. Looking back, I can proudly claim that as an institution, the judiciary has lived up to the faith reposed in it by the Constituent Assembly. The fact that the Indian judiciary continues to be last hope for those in distress suggests that it is on the right track. For this, I give full credit to my colleagues on the bench, present and past, and the members of the bar and the registry. The commitment made in the preamble of the Constitution to secure social, economic, and political justice to all the citizens impose a sacred duty upon the state as a whole. The general perception is that securing justice is the responsibility of the judiciary alone. This is not correct. To the contrary, it is all the three organs of the state which are responsible for upholding this commitment to secure justice. All the three organs are repositories of the constitutional trust, while the judiciary is the guardian of the Constitution. Its role and scope of action is ultimately limited by the very narrow of the judicial process. The executive and the legislature must work in conjunction with the judiciary to ensure complete justice as envisaged under the Constitution. Any deviation by the legislature or the executive from the path prescribed by the Constitution will only lead to additional burden to the judiciary. The Lakshman Rekha drawn by the Constitution is a sacrosanct, but there are times when courts are compelled to pay attention to unresolved grievances in the interest of justice. The intention behind such limited judicial intervention is to nudge the executive and not usurp its role. The constitutional obligation and duty of the judiciary's intervene needs to be appreciated in this context. Attempts to project such interventions and constructive observations as the targeting of one institution by another are totally misplaced. If encouraged, such attempts will prove to be detrimental to the health of democracy. Misgivings about the constitutional scheme are mainly due to lack of constitutional literacy among even the well-informed sections of the society. Despite it being the document that decides their destiny, the vast majority of our population is oblivious of its relevance and importance. There is an urgent need to launch a massive drive to raise awareness about the constitutional rights and the duties of the citizens, as well as the roles of the other coordinate branches of the state. I am glad to learn that the Government of India launched a video series yesterday aimed at educating children about the Constitution. To take it to the larger population, more such material need to be made available to the Indian languages. A healthy democracy is known by its dynamic institutions. Every dynamic public institution needs to constantly evolve and innovate in order to keep pace with the changing times. The Indian judiciary is no exception to this. The Supreme Court of India must be on its toes and its innovative best to meet the challenges. A comparison is often sought to be drawn between the judiciary of 1950s and the present-day judiciary. It is unfair to do so. Since the Constitution came into effect, it has undergone changes 105 times through amendments. This dynamic document can evolve in tune with the times. It is only logical that the judiciary moved beyond the restrictive constitutional philosophy of its formative days. What we are witnessing now is a totally transformed judiciary. This enrichment brought about during the last 7 decades is due to more informed citizenry and rise in expectations of the people and increasing challenges of diverse nature faced by the society. One notable outcome of this enrichment is the idea of public interest litigation. I am not sure if anywhere else in the world a simple letter written by a common man receives judicial attention of the highest order. Yes, it is sometimes ridiculed as publicity interest litigation due to occasional misuse. We must be very ever vigilant to discourage motivated PILs. At the same time, we must also acknowledge the enormous public good achieved through such progressive expansion of constitutional jurisprudence. But the same judiciary, which offers solutions based on mere postcard, paradoxically, struggles for years to take regular litigations to the logical conclusion due to various complex reasons. The question is how to address the issue of protracted litigations and pendency, which is agitating the minds of the citizenry. In this context, I welcome the suggestions made by the learned Attorney General. As far as the pendency of the Supreme Court is concerned, we have initiated steps to reduce it by harnessing technology. Pendency in lower judiciary is particularly alarming. It calls for multi-pronged approach involving all the stakeholders. The solutions that we could think are structural change in the hierarchy of the courts, filling up of the existing vacancies of judicial officers, creation of more and more posts, filling up vacancies of public prosecutor, government pleaders, and standing counsels, creation of necessary infrastructure, sensitizing the police and the executive about the need to cooperate in court proceedings, deployment of modern technology tools. Infrastructure development is proving to be a difficult task. I must acknowledge that the Union government has been making reasonable budgetary allocation through its centrally sponsored schemes for this purpose. But due to non-availability of matching grants by some states, the budget allocated remains underutilized. I feel the situation call for the creation of special purpose vehicles, namely national and state judicial infrastructure authorities in the lines of NALSA and SALSA. This will help us make optimal use of the available fund and standardize infrastructure development under one roof. The Government of India can follow the model implemented for modernization of police stations across the country. The new court complexes should be able to deploy modern technological tools to accelerate justice delivery. For this, modern equipment with video conferencing facilities and high-speed networks are essential. The HE committee headed by Brother Justice Chandrachud and the Committee on Artificial Intelligence chaired by Brother Justice Nageshwar Rao are doing a stellar job in this direction. I beseech the Honorable Prime Minister to strengthen our efforts in building state-of-the-art of court complexes for the lower judiciary. An area of grave concern for the judiciary is the increasing attacks on judges. Physical attacks on judicial officers on the rise. Then there are attacks on the judiciary in the media, particularly social media. These attacks appear to be sponsored and synchronized. The law enforcing agency, particularly central agencies, need to deal with such malicious attacks effectively. The governments are expected to create a secure environment so that the judges and judicial officers can function fearlessly. My experience as a legal professional in different roles is what prompted me to call for Indianization of judiciary. I am using the term Indianization to refer a wide range of reforms that our judicial system requires. The judicial system, as it exists in our country today, is essentially still colonial in nature. It takes no account of the social realities or the local conditions. The procedures followed, the language of arguments and judgments, and the high costs involved are all contributing to alienate the common man from the judicial system. People should feel confident in approaching the courts. Only when litigants get a chance to directly participate, their faith in the process and outcome will be reinforced. There is therefore a pressing need to simplify the entire process by removing avoidable procedural barriers and ensuring greater use of the local language. Coming back to the issue of vacancies. Recently, we have witnessed many appointments in the higher judiciary being cleared by the government. It is very heartening to note that the number of vacancies in the apex court is reduced to just one. Now, there are 4 women judges in the Supreme Court for the first time. I hope to see this number grow further. My brothers in the collegia worked overtime to facilitate filling up of the vacancies across the high courts as well. This is an ongoing exercise, and I am sure vacancies will be reduced to the bare minimum soon. I look forward to the continued cooperation of the government. The Honorable Prime Minister was kind enough to lend his support to the legal awareness mission, which was led by NALSA under the dynamic leadership of my brother Justice Lalit. I also thank the Honorable Prime Minister for taking out time for this event today. Within a span of 2 weeks, the Honorable Prime Minister graciously came forward to host my brothers and sisters from Supreme Court and across the country, not once but twice. Having a law minister who understands the functioning of the constitutional system is highly appreciated. His cooperation with the legal fraternity and the judiciary is invaluable. We, the judges, are also citizens of this great nation. We too have dreams and aspirations to be part of a society which is recognized world over as inclusive, modern, prosperous, and progressive. The great Telugu poet Gurajada Apparao Garu said once, "Desamante matti kadoi, desamante manushloi." I remember the Honorable Prime Minister himself quoting this. It means a country is not defined by territorial boundaries. A country is defined by its people. The judiciary has a duty towards the people. On this day, I do not think there is any more patriotic act for the judiciary than rededicating itself to uphold the Constitution in the interest of we the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I now request the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, to deliver the inaugural address.
नमस्कार। चीफ जस्टिस श्री एन.वी. रमन्ना जी, जस्टिस यू ललित जी, कानून मंत्री श्री किरण रिजिजू जी, जस्टिस डी.वाई. चंद्रचूड़ जी, अटॉर्नी जनरल श्री के वेणुगोपाल जी, सुप्रीम कोर्ट बार एसोसिएशन के अध्यक्ष श्रीमान विकास सिंह जी और देश के न्याय व्यवस्था से जुड़े देवियों और सज्जनों, आज सुबह मैं विधायिका और कार्यपालिका के साथियों के साथ था और अब न्यायपालिका से जुड़े आप सभी विद्वानों के बीच में हूं। हम सभी की अलग अलग भूमिकाएं, अलग अलग जिम्मेदारियां और काम करने के तरीके भी अलग अलग हो सकते हैं, लेकिन हमारी आस्था, हमारी प्रेरणा, हमारी ऊर्जा का स्रोत एक ही है, हमारा संविधान। मुझे खुशी है कि आज हमारी ये सामूहिक भावना संविधान दिवस पर इस आयोजन के रूप में व्यक्त हो रही है। हमारे संवैधानिक संकल्पों को मजबूत कर रही है। इस कार्य से जुड़े सभी लोग अभिनंदन के अधिकारी हैं। माननीय, आजादी के लिए जीने मरने वाले लोगों ने जो सपने देखे थे, उन सपनों के प्रकाश में और हजारों साल की भारत की महान परंपरा को संजोए हुए हमारे संविधान निर्माताओं ने हमें संविधान दिया। सैकड़ों वर्षों की गुलामी ने भारत को अनेक मुसीबतों में झोंक दिया था। किसी युग में सोने की चिड़िया कहा जाने वाला भारत गरीबी, भूखमरी, बीमारी से जूझ रहा था। इस पृष्ठभूमि में देश को आगे बढ़ाने में संविधान हमेशा हमारी मदद करता रहा है। लेकिन आज दुनिया के अन्य देशों की तुलना में देखें तो जो देश भारत के करीब करीब साथ ही आजाद हुए, वो आज हमसे काफी आगे है। यानी
अभी बहुत कुछ किया जाना बाकी है। हमें मिलकर लक्ष्य तक पहुंचना है। हम सभी जानते हैं हमारे संविधान में इंक्लूजन पर कितना जोर दिया गया है, लेकिन ये भी सच्चाई रही है कि आजादी के इतने दशकों बाद भी बड़ी संख्या में देश के लोग एक्सक्लूजन को भोगने के लिए मजबूर रहे हैं। वो करोड़ों लोग जिनके घरों में शौचालय तक नहीं था, वो करोड़ों लोग जो बिजली के अभाव में अंधेरे में अपनी जिंदगी बिता रहे थे, वो करोड़ों लोग जीवन का सबसे बड़ा संघर्ष घर के लिए थोड़ा सा पानी जुटाना था। उनकी तकलीफ, उनका दर्द समझकर उनका जीवन आसान बनाने के लिए खुद को खपा देना मैं संविधान का असली सम्मान मानता हूं। और इसलिए आज मुझे संतोष है कि देश में संविधान की इस मूल भावना के अनुरूप एक्सक्लूजन को इंक्लूजन में बदलने का भगीरथ अभियान तेजी से चल रहा है। और इसका जो सबसे बड़ा लाभ क्या हुआ है, ये भी हमें समझना होगा। जिन 2 करोड़ से अधिक गरीबों को आज अपना पक्का घर मिला है, जिन 8 करोड़ से अधिक गरीब परिवारों को उज्ज्वला योजना के तहत मुफ्त गैस कनेक्शन मिला है, जिन 50 करोड़ से अधिक गरीबों को बड़े से बड़े अस्पताल में 5 लाख रुपए तक का मुफ्त इलाज सुनिश्चित हुआ है, जिन करोड़ों गरीबों की पहली बार बीमा और पेंशन जैसी बुनियादी सुविधाएं मिली है, उन गरीबों के जीवन की बहुत बड़ी चिंता कम हुई है। ये योजनाएं उनके लिए बड़ा संबल बनी है। इसी कोरोना काल में पिछले कई महीनों से 80 करोड़ से अधिक लोगों को मुफ्त अनाज सुनिश्चित किया जा रहा है। प्रधानमंत्री गरीब कल्याण अन्न योजना पर सरकार 2,60,000 करोड़ रुपए से अधिक खर्च करके गरीबों को मुफ्त अनाज दे रही है। अभी कल ही हमने इस योजना को अगले मार्च महीने तक के लिए बढ़ा दिया है। हमारे जो डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स हैं वो कहते हैं सिटीजन्स, men and women equally have the right to an adequate means of livelihood। वो इसी भावना का ही तो प्रतिबिंब है। आप सभी ये मानेंगे कि जब देश का सामान्य मानवी, देश का गरीब विकास की मुख्य धारा से जुड़ता है, जब उसे इक्वलिटी और इक्वल अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलती है, तो उसकी दुनिया पूरी तरह बदल जाती है। जब रेहड़ी, ठेले, पटरी वाले भी बैंक क्रेडिट की व्यवस्था से जुड़ता है, तो उसको राष्ट्र निर्माण में भागीदारी का एहसास होता है। जब दिव्यांगों को उनको ध्यान में रखते हुए पब्लिक प्लेसेस, पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट और दूसरी सुविधाओं का निर्माण होता है, जब उन्हें आजादी के 70 साल बाद पहली बार कॉमन साइन लैंग्वेज मिलती है, तो उनमें आत्मविश्वास जगता है। जब ट्रांसजेंडर को कानूनी संरक्षण मिलता है, ट्रांसजेंडर को पद्म पुरस्कार मिलते हैं, तो उनकी भी समाज पर, संविधान पर आस्था और मजबूत होती है। जब 3 तलाक जैसी कुरीति के विरुद्ध कड़ा कानून बनता है, तो उन बहन बेटियों का संविधान पर भरोसा और सशक्त होता है, जो हर तरह से नाउम्मीद हो चुकी थी। महानुभाव, सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास, सबका प्रयास, ये संविधान की भावना का सबसे सशक्त प्रकटीकरण है। संविधान के लिए समर्पित सरकार विकास में भेद नहीं करती और ये हमने करके दिखाया है। आज गरीब से गरीब को भी क्वालिटी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर तक वही एक्सेस मिल रहा है जो कभी साधन संपन्न लोगों तक सीमित था। आज लद्दाख, अंडमान और निकोबार, नॉर्थ ईस्ट के विकास, इन सभी क्षेत्रों पर देश का उतना ही फोकस है जितना दिल्ली और मुंबई जैसे मेट्रो शहरों पर है। लेकिन इन सब के बीच मैं एक और बात की तरफ आपको ध्यान दिलाऊंगा। आपने भी जरूर अनुभव किया होगा कि जब सरकार किसी एक वर्ग के लिए, किसी एक छोटे से टुकड़े के लिए कुछ करती है तो बड़ी उदारवादी कहलाती है, उसकी बड़ी प्रशंसा होती है कि उनके लिए कुछ किया। लेकिन मैं हैरान हूं, कभी कभी हम देखते हैं कोई सरकार एक आध राज्य के लिए कुछ कर ले, कुछ राज्य की भलाई का कोई काम करते हैं तो भी वाहवाही हो जाती है। लेकिन जब सरकार सबके लिए करती है, हर नागरिक के लिए करती है, हर राज्य के लिए करती है, तो उसे उतना महत्व नहीं दिया जाता जिसका कभी कभी उसका जिक्र तक नहीं होता है। सरकार की योजनाओं से कैसे हर वर्ग का, हर राज्य का समान रूप से भला हो रहा है, इस पर उतना ध्यान नहीं दिया जाता है। पिछले 7 वर्षों में हमने बिना भेदभाव के, बिना पक्षपात के विकास के हर व्यक्ति, हर वर्ग और देश के हर कोने तक पहुंचाने का प्रयास किया है। इस साल 15 अगस्त को मैंने गरीब कल्याण से जुड़ी योजनाओं के सैचुरेशन की बात कही और इसके लिए हम मिशन मोड पर जुटे भी हैं। सर्वजन हिताय, सर्वजन सुखाय, इस मंत्र को लेकर के कार्य करने का हमारा प्रयास है। आज इससे देश की तस्वीर कैसे बदली है, ये हमें हाल के नेशनल फैमिली हेल्थ सर्वे रिपोर्ट में भी दिखाई देता है। इस रिपोर्ट के बहुत से तथ्य इस बात को सिद्ध करते हैं कि जब नेक नियत के साथ काम किया जाए, सही दिशा में आगे बढ़ा जाए और सारी शक्ति जुटाकर लक्ष्य को प्राप्त करने का प्रयास किया जाए तो सुखद परिणाम अवश्य आते हैं। जेंडर इक्वलिटी की बात करें तो पुरुषों की तुलना में बेटियों की संख्या बढ़ रही है। गर्भवती महिलाओं को अस्पताल में डिलीवरी की ज्यादा अवसर उपलब्ध हो रहे हैं। इस वजह से माता मृत्यु दर, शिशु मृत्यु दर पर कम हो रही है। और भी बहुत सारे इंडिकेटर ऐसे हैं जिस पर हम एक देश के रूप में बहुत अच्छा कर रहे हैं। इन सभी इंडिकेटर्स में हर परसेंटेज पॉइंट की बढ़ोतरी सिर्फ एक आंकड़ा भर नहीं है, ये करोड़ों भारतीयों को मिल रहे उनके हक का प्रमाण है। ये बहुत आवश्यक है कि जन कल्याण से जुड़ी योजनाओं का पूरा लाभ लोगों को मिले, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर से जुड़ी परियोजनाओं समय पर पूरी हो। किसी भी कारण से हुई अनावश्यक देरी नागरिक को उसके हक से वंचित रखती है। मैं गुजरात का रहने वाला हूं तो मैं सरदार सरोवर डैम का उदाहरण देना चाहता हूं। सरदार वल्लभ भाई पटेल ने मां नर्मदा पर इस तरह के डैम का सपना देखा था। पंडित नेहरू ने इसका शिलान्यास किया था, लेकिन ये परियोजना दशकों तक अपप्रचार में फंसी रही, पर्यावरण के नाम पर चले आंदोलन में फंसी रही, न्यायालय तक इसमें निर्णय लेने में हिचकिचाते रहे। वर्ल्ड बैंक ने भी इसके लिए पैसे देने से मना कर दिया था, लेकिन उसी नर्मदा के पानी से कच्छ में जो विकास हुआ, विकास का कार्य हुआ, आज हिंदुस्तान के तेज गति से आगे बढ़ रहे डिस्ट्रिक्ट में कच्छ जिला है। कच्छ को इस एक प्रकार के रेगिस्तान जैसा इलाका, तेज गति से विकसित होने वाले क्षेत्रों में उसकी जगह बन गई। कभी रेगिस्तान के रूप में जाने जाने वाला कच्छ, पलायन के लिए पहचान जाने वाला कच्छ, आज एग्रो एक्सपोर्ट की वजह से अपनी पहचान बना रहा है। इससे बड़ा ग्रीन अवार्ड और क्या हो सकता है? माननीय, भारत के लिए और विश्व के अनेक देशों के लिए, हमारी अनेक पीढ़ियों के लिए उपनिवेशवाद, कॉलोनियलिज्म, उपनिवेशवाद की बेड़ियों में जकड़े हुए जीना एक मजबूरी थी। भारत की आजादी के समय से पूरे विश्व में एक पोस्ट कॉलोनियल कालखंड की शुरुआत हुई, अनेकों देश आजाद हुए। आज पूरे विश्व में कोई भी ऐसा देश नहीं है जो प्रकट रूप से किसी अन्य देश के उपनिवेश के रूप में एग्जिस्ट करता है। लेकिन इसका मतलब यह नहीं है कि उपनिवेशवादी मानसिकता, कॉलोनियल माइंडसेट समाप्त हो गया है। हम देख रहे हैं कि हम मानसिकता अनेक विकृतियों को जन्म दे रही है। इसका सबसे स्पष्ट उदाहरण हमें विकासशील देशों की विकास यात्राओं में आ रही बाधाओं में दिखाई देता है। जिन साधनों से, जिन मार्गों पर चलते हुए विकसित विश्व आज के मुकाम पर पहुंचा है, आज वही साधन, वही मार्ग विकासशील देशों के लिए बंद करने के लिए प्रयास किए जाते हैं। पिछले दशकों में इसके लिए अलग अलग प्रकार की शब्दावली का जाल रचाया जाता है, लेकिन उद्देश्य एक ही रहा है, विकासशील देशों की प्रगति को रोकना। आजकल हम देखते हैं कि पर्यावरण के विषय को भी इसी काम के लिए हाईजैक करने का प्रयास हो रहा है। कुछ सप्ताह पहले हमने COP26 समिट में इसका जीवंत उदाहरण देखा है। अगर एब्सोल्यूट क्यूमुलेटिव एमिशंस की बात करें तो विकसित देशों ने मिलकर 1850 से अब तक, 1815 से अब तक भारत से 15 गुना अधिक उत्सर्जन किया है। अगर हम पर कैपिटा बेसिस की बात करें तो भी विकसित देशों ने भारत के मुकाबले 15 गुना अधिक उत्सर्जन किया है। अमेरिका और यूरोपीय संघ ने मिलकर भारत की तुलना में 11 गुना अधिक एब्सोल्यूट क्यूमुलेटिव एमिशन किया है। इसमें भी पर कैपिटा बेसिस को आधार बनाए तो अमेरिका और यूरोपीय संघ ने भारत की तुलना में 20 गुना अधिक उत्सर्जन किया है। फिर भी आज, और हमें गर्व है, भारत जिसकी सभ्यता और संस्कृति में ही प्रकृति के साथ जीने की प्रवृत्ति है, जहां पत्थरों में, पेड़ों में, प्रकृति के कण कण में, जहां पौधे में भी परमात्मा देखा जाता है, उसका स्वरूप देखा जाता है, जहां धरती को मां के रूप में पूजा जाता है, उस भारत को पर्यावरण संरक्षण के उपदेश सुनाए जाते हैं। और हमारे लिए ये मूल्य सिर्फ किताबी नहीं है, किताबी बातें नहीं है। आज भारत में लायन, टाइगर, डॉल्फिन आदि की संख्या और अनेक प्रकार की बायोडायवर्सिटी के मानकों में लगातार सुधार हो रहा है। भारत में वन क्षेत्र बढ़ रहा है। भारत में डिग्रेडेड लैंड का सुधार हो रहा है। गाड़ियों के ईंधन के मानकों को हमने स्वेच्छा से बढ़ाया है। हर प्रकार की रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी, उस क्षेत्र में हम विश्व के अग्रणी देशों में हैं और पेरिस समझौते के लक्ष्यों को समय से पहले प्राप्त करने की ओर अग्रसर अगर कोई है तो एकमात्र हिंदुस्तान है। G20 देशों के समूह में अच्छे से अच्छा काम करने वाला कोई देश है, दुनिया ने माना है, वो हिंदुस्तान है। और फिर भी ऐसे भारत पर पर्यावरण के नाम पर भांति भांति के दबाव बनाए जाते हैं। यह सब उपनिवेशवाद मानसिकता का ही परिणाम है। लेकिन दुर्भाग्य यह है कि हमारे देश में भी ऐसी ही मानसिकता के चलते अपने ही देश के विकास में रोड़े अटकाए जाते हैं। कभी फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन के नाम पर तो कभी किसी और चीज का सहारा लेकर। हमारे देश की परिस्थितियां, हमारे युवाओं की आकांक्षाएं सपनों को बिना जाने समझे बहुत सी बार दूसरे देशों के बेंचमार्क पर भारत को तोड़ने का प्रयास होता है और इसकी आड़ में विकास के रास्ते बंद करने की कोशिश होती है। इसका नुकसान ये जो करते हैं ऐसे लोगों को भुगतना नहीं पड़ता है। इसका नुकसान भुगतना पड़ता है उस मां को जिसका बच्चा बिजली प्लांट स्थापित न होने के कारण पढ़ नहीं पाता। इसका नुकसान भुगतना पड़ता है उस पिता को जो रुके हुए सड़क प्रोजेक्ट के कारण अपनी संतान को समय पर अस्पताल नहीं पहुंचा पाता। इसका नुकसान भुगतना पड़ता है उस मध्यम वर्गीय परिवार को जिसके लिए आधुनिक जीवन की सुविधाएं पर्यावरण के नाम पर उसकी आमदनी से बाहर पहुंचा दी गई। इस कॉलोनियल माइंडसेट की वजह से भारत जैसे देश में, विकास के लिए प्रयास कर रहे देश में करोड़ों आशाएं टूटती हैं, आकांक्षाएं दम तोड़ती है। आजादी के आंदोलन में जो संकल्प शक्ति पैदा हुई उसे और अधिक मजबूत करने में ये कॉलोनियल माइंडसेट बहुत बड़ी बाधा है। हमें इसे दूर करना ही होगा और इसके लिए हमारी सबसे बड़ी शक्ति, हमारा सबसे बड़ा प्रेरणा स्रोत हमारा संविधान ही है। माननीय सरकार और न्यायपालिका दोनों का ही जन्म संविधान की कोख से हुआ है, इसलिए दोनों ही जुड़वा संतानें हैं। संविधान की वजह से ही ये दोनों अस्तित्व में आए हैं। इसलिए व्यापक दृष्टिकोण से देखें तो अलग अलग होने के बाद भी दोनों एक दूसरे के पूरक है। हमारे यहां शास्त्रों में भी कहा गया है, ऐक्यम बलम सामंजस्य, ऐक्यम बलम समाजस्य, ऐक्यम बलम समाजस्य तत् अभावे से दुर्बलः तस्मात् ऐक्यम प्रशंसन्ति दृढ़म राष्ट्र हितैषणी। अर्थात किसी समाज की, देश की ताकत उसकी एकता और एकजुट प्रयासों में होती है। इसलिए जो मजबूत राष्ट्र के हितैषी होते हैं वो एकता की प्रशंसा करते हैं, उस पर जोर देते हैं। राष्ट्र के हितों को सर्वोपरि रखते हुए ही यही एकता देश की हर संस्था के प्रयासों में होनी चाहिए। आज जब देश अमृत काल में अपने लिए असाधारण लक्ष्य तय कर रहा है, दशकों पुरानी समस्याओं के समाधान तलाश कर नए भविष्य के लिए संकल्प ले रहा है, तो ये सिद्धि सबके साथ से ही पूरी होगी। इसलिए देश ने आने वाले 25 सालों के लिए, जब देश आजादी की शताब्दी मनाता होगा, और इसलिए सबका प्रयास, इसका देश ने आह्वान किया है। निश्चित तौर पर इस आह्वान में एक बड़ी भूमिका जुडिशरी की भी है। महोदय, हमारी चर्चा में बिना भूले हुए एक बात लगातार सुनने को आती है, बार बार उसे दोहराया जाता है, सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर। सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर की बात न्यायपालिका हो, कार्यपालिका हो या फिर विधायिका, अपने आप में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण रही है। इसके साथ ही आजादी के इस अमृत काल में, भारत की आजादी के 100 वर्ष पूरे होने तक, ये जो अमृत काल है, ये अमृत कालखंड में संविधान की भावना के अनुरूप कलेक्टिव रिजॉल्व दिखाने की आवश्यकता है। आज देश के सामान्य मानवी के पास जो कुछ है, वो उससे ज्यादा का हकदार है। जब हम देश की आजादी की शताब्दी मनाएंगे, उस समय का भारत कैसा होगा, इसके लिए हमें आज ही काम करना है। इसलिए देश की उसकी आकांक्षाओं को पूरा करने के लिए कलेक्टिव रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी के साथ चलना बहुत जरूरी है। सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर के मजबूत अधिष्ठान पर हमें कलेक्टिव रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी का मार्ग निर्धारित करना है, रोड मैप बनाना है, लक्ष्य तय करने हैं और मंजिल तक देश को पहुंचाना है। माननीय, कोरोना काल ने जस्टिस डिलीवरी में टेक्नोलॉजी के इस्तेमाल को लेकर नया भरोसा पैदा किया है। डिजिटल इंडिया के मेगा मिशन में न्यायपालिका की सहभागिता है। 18,000 से ज्यादा कोर्ट्स का कंप्यूटराइज होना, 98% कोर्ट कॉम्प्लेक्स का वाइड एरिया नेटवर्क से जुड़ जाना, रियल टाइम में जुडिशियल डेटा ट्रांसमिशन के लिए नेशनल जुडिशियल डेटा ग्रिड का फंक्शनल होना, ई कोर्ट प्लेटफॉर्म का लाखों लोगों तक पहुंचना, ये बताता है कि आज टेक्नोलॉजी हमारे जस्टिस सिस्टम की कितनी बड़ी ताकत बन चुकी है। और आने वाले समय में हम एक एडवांस जुडिशरी को काम करते हुए देखेंगे। समय परिवर्तनीय है, दुनिया बदलती रहती है, लेकिन ये बदलाव मानवता के लिए इवोल्यूशन का जरिया बने हैं। ऐसा इसलिए क्योंकि मानवता ने इन बदलावों को स्वीकार किया और साथ ही मानवीय मूल्यों को शाश्वत बनाए रखा। न्याय की अवधारणा इन मानवीय मूल्यों का सबसे परिष्कृत विचार है और संविधान न्याय की इस अवधारणा की सबसे परिष्कृत व्यवस्था है। इस व्यवस्था को गतिशील और प्रगतिशील बनाए रखने का दायित्व हम सभी पर है। अपनी इन भूमिकाओं का निर्वाह हम सब पूरी निष्ठा से करेंगे और आजादी के 100 साल से पहले एक नए भारत का सपना पूरा होगा। हम लगातार उन बातों से प्रेरित हैं जिस बात के लिए हम गर्व करते हैं, और वो मंत्र हमारे लिए हैं, संगच्छध्वम संवदवदम संवो मनासानी जानता। हमारे लक्ष्य समान हो, हमारे मन समान हो और हम साथ मिलकर उन लक्ष्यों को प्राप्त करें। इसी भावना के साथ मैं आज संविधान दिवस के इस पवित्र माहौल में आप सबको, देशवासियों को भी अनेक अनेक शुभकामनाएं देते हुए मेरी बात को समाप्त करता हूं। फिर एक बार आप सबको बहुत बहुत बधाई। धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, sir. May I now request the Honorable Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, Judge, Supreme Court of India, to propose a vote of thanks.
Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, Honorable the Chief Justice of India, Shri Justice N.V. Ramana, the Union Minister of Law and Justice, Honorable Shri Kiran Rijiju ji, my distinguished and learned colleague, Shri Justice Uday Lalit, my distinguished colleagues on the bench, the learned Attorney General for India, Shri K.K. Venugopal, Chief Justices of the High Courts and Judges, the Solicitor General, Shri Tushar Mehta, the President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, Shri Vikas Singh, our most valued guests who are in physical attendance, and citizens of India who have joined us virtually. It is a unique honor to propose a vote of thanks on the 72nd Constitution Day in celebration of our nation's anchor and bulwark. It was invigorating to hear perspectives from constitutional functionaries and stakeholders who engage with the Constitution every day. While the Constitution may formally separate the institutions we represent, it integrates us in the vision to preserve, protect, and nurture the roots and the foliage of our democracy. The roots are her foundation, the foliage, her manifestations. When India attained freedom, our people forged unity amidst a plurality of the hues of region, language, culture, and religion. We wrested free from our colonial past and guaranteed meaningful and representative citizenship to every person. The Hindi text of our preamble beautifully exemplifies the pillars of our Constitution. Nyay, Samanta, स्वतंत्रता और देश की अखंडता सुनिश्चित करने वाली बंधुता. The Constitution represents a commitment to our democratic vision and charts our path towards our collective aspirations. 72 years ago, Dr. Babasaheb B.R. Ambedkar, while delivering his last address to the Constituent Assembly, spoke about the monumental effort that the Assembly had invested in structuring our political democracy. But Dr. Ambedkar forewarned that our democratic ambition does not end with the framing of our Constitution. Preserving fidelity to its spirit and committing to a holistic conception of one person, one value, was the task of future generations. This event reflects our shared pride in celebrating over 7 decades of upholding the constitutive promise that we, the people of India, made to ourselves. Our ongoing constitutional project has survived periods of peace and strain and emerged as a resilient framework for transformation, participation, and emancipation. If we have to choose one moment in these 7 decades that has represented a tectonic shift in our society, it is in the invention of the World Wide Web. As we all become digital natives, technology mediates our community and our personhood. Constitution Day is not just an occasion to celebrate our rights and to reaffirm our duties, but also for us to make a commitment to making our judicial institutions more responsive to the service of our citizens. The E-Committee of the Supreme Court has endeavored to broaden access to justice by digitizing our courts and over 3,100 crore records of the judiciary. We have launched E-Seva Kendras as a one-stop solution for accessing judicial services in every one of our 3,296 court establishments. This will ensure that justice is accessible to every individual in the country, irrespective of their socio-economic location. Tomorrow we launch a multilingual mobile application that will bring the judicial system to the fingertips of all citizens. This is our vision for phase 3 of the e-courts project. I earnestly hope that every stakeholder contributes to this deliberative mission of enhancing our conception of justice. As a judge of the Supreme Court and a disciple of the Constitution, I extend a hearty vote of thanks to all speakers for sharing their thoughts today. I thank the Honorable Prime Minister for sparing his valuable time to attend this event. I'm deeply grateful to the Chief Justice of India, who is a pillar of support behind every initiative of the Supreme Court, including the E-Committee. Thanks due to my distinguished brother judge, Shri Justice Uday Lalit, for his invaluable contribution to this event. To the Union Minister for Law and Justice, who together with the Department of Justice has personally supported and guided me on our collective mission on the E-Committee. To the distinguished Attorney General for India, who has mentored not only lawyers, but also a whole generation of judges. And to the President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, who represents the stellar bar that ably assists and complements the bench. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the registry and all the staff who are engaged with the Supreme Court. They have and continue to work tirelessly to secure the functioning of the judiciary. In the judicial system, they are the real frontline workers. In a moment of silence in our hearts, we honor the memory of those of our staff who could not survive the pandemic. But yet, the history of humanity is a history founded on hope for a better future, and that is why we live and strive every day of our lives. We look forward to our celebration of the Constitution Day today and every day. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, sir.
भारतीय गणतंत्र का आधार है हमारा संविधान। दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा लिखित भारतीय संविधान करोड़ों सपनों को साकार करता है। आज हर देशवासी की आंखों में चमक है, लक्ष्य की ओर बढ़ते कदम हैं और वर्तमान के बल पर सुखद भविष्य की उम्मीद है। भारत सशक्त हो रहा है, समृद्ध हो रहा है और नई नई बुलंदियों को हासिल कर आगे बढ़ रहा है।
सुप्रीम कोर्ट द्वारा संविधान दिवस समारोह कार्यक्रम का ये आयोजन था, जो हम आपको दिखा रहे थे।